Most people believe power comes from saying the right thing at the right time. Psychology says the opposite. Here's a quiet experiment you can run in your own life. The next time someone challenges you, questions your decision, doubts your competence, or throws a subtle accusation your way, notice what happens inside your body before you speak. Your heart rate rises, your shoulders tense, your mind rushes to assemble evidence. Not because the situation demands it, but because your nervous system has detected a threat. That reflex is older than logic. Imagine a workplace meeting. A colleague leans back and says, "I'm not sure you really thought this through." No shouting, no insults, just enough doubt to put you on trial. Most people respond instantly. They explain the process. They justify the choice. They add context. They talk faster than usual. And in doing so, they quietly surrender authority. What's happening here has very little to do with truth. It has everything to do with hierarchy. Human interactions are constantly negotiating status, even when no one admits it. The person who explains positions themselves as someone seeking approval. The person who remains grounded, measured, and selective with words signals something else entirely: self-trust. This is not about dominance or arrogance. It's about frame control, the invisible structure that decides who reacts and who defines. Your brain is wired to protect you from exclusion. Thousands of years ago, being misunderstood by the group could mean death. So your biology learned to treat accusations as emergencies. That's why explanations spill out before you've chosen them. The body wants safety now, not strength later. But modern social environments reward the opposite response. When you rush to clarify, you imply that the other person has the right to evaluate you. You accept their premise. You step into their mental courtroom. Even if your explanation is flawless, the posture itself lowers your perceived status. People don't measure confidence by correctness. They measure it by composure. Watch how authority figures behave. A senior executive doesn't narrate every decision. A respected leader doesn't rush to defend every misinterpretation. Not because they're always right, but because they don't outsource their identity. Silence plays a critical role here, and it's often misunderstood. Silence is not passivity. In social dynamics, silence is information. It communicates certainty, self-regulation, and boundaries without argument. When someone provokes you and you don't immediately fill the space, their brain has to work harder. They're forced to confront their own intent. Consider a social situation. A friend makes a pointed comment. "You've changed. You're not as generous as you used to be." The instinct is to list sacrifices, favors, and context. But pause instead. Let the statement sit. Maintain a neutral expression. Let the moment breathe. Very often, the other person will continue talking, not because you invited them to, but because silence unsettles them. They begin to justify their own words. The power dynamic quietly reverses. This works because many accusations are not requests for truth. They're tests. The test is simple. Will you destabilize yourself to regain approval? Subscribe for calm, intelligent insights into psychology, power dynamics, and human behavior, designed to sharpen awareness, strengthen boundaries, and elevate how you move through life. There's another counterintuitive response that psychology finds particularly effective: selective agreement. Not submission, not apology, but precision. If someone says, "You always miss details," and you respond, "That report had mistakes. I'll correct them," you've done something subtle. You acknowledge reality without absorbing the insult. You address behavior, not identity. Insecure people argue about labels. Secure people correct outcomes. This distinction matters. When you reject exaggerated judgments and respond only to what's real, you communicate emotional maturity. You also deprive the other person of escalation. Conflict feeds on resistance. Remove the resistance, and the conflict starves. Sometimes a calm reframing is even more effective than silence. When someone interrogates you, and why would you do it that way? Notice the structure of the exchange. Questions place the asker above the answerer. You're being positioned as someone who must justify themselves. You don't have to accept that role. A simple response like, "What part of it concerns you?" shifts the axis. Now the focus is on their reaction, not your defense. You're not evading responsibility. You're refusing unnecessary subordination. This isn't manipulation. It's boundary setting through awareness. Many people misunderstand strength as verbal dominance. In reality, strength is the ability to remain internally steady when external pressure appears. The calmer person usually controls the interaction, not because they overpower others, but because they're not controlled by the moment. There's an even deeper layer beneath all of this: self-knowledge. Insults only penetrate where there is internal doubt. If someone calls you irresponsible, and it doesn't touch anything unresolved inside you, your body stays relaxed. If it stings, it's worth asking why, not to fix their opinion, but to understand your own reaction. People who have confronted their flaws don't fear having them named. They don't rush to correct perceptions because their sense of self isn't fragile. They know where they fall short. They also know it doesn't define them. This is why the most grounded individuals rarely explain themselves. Not because they're secretive, but because they're integrated. There's nothing to protect. Try a small practice this week. When something goes wrong, state the fact without the story. I'm late. That didn't work. I missed that. No justification. No external blame. Just ownership. Notice what happens. The tension you expect often doesn't arrive. In many cases, respect increases. People trust those who don't scramble for innocence. You'll also notice discomfort. Yours. The urge to add context will feel almost physical. That urge is the old survival system looking for reassurance. Let it pass. You're not in danger. You're just no longer performing. Over time, something shifts. Conversations become cleaner. Manipulative behavior loses traction. And most importantly, your energy stops leaking into unnecessary defenses. You begin to move through the world as someone who responds by choice, not reflex. That's the quiet form of power few people talk about. Not the power to dominate, but the power to remain unmoved. Not the power to convince, but the power to stand without explanation. And paradoxically, when you no longer need to be understood,